Welcome, everyone. I'm Sandra Bargman. A few years ago, I wrote and performed a solo show called The Edge of Every Day, which was an exploration of the rough edges and contradictions we all face and grapple with. The show hit a nerve, and the relevance of the topic would only grow over time, more than I could have foreseen. So, here we are. Real talk with real people, sharing stories and perspectives that spark provocative invitations to leap out of what's safe, on the edge of every day. Thanks for listening. Hello, everyone. We are live in the hive. Thank you for joining me on this, the 13th episode of The Edge of Every Day here on talkradio.nyc. We have started this new year recommitted to courageous conversations and recharged to face what awaits in 2022. For those of you who are tuning in for the first time, and for those of you who don't know me yet, I encourage you to check out my bio and talkradio.nyc, or of course you can check out my website, sandrabargman.com, or tune in to any of my previous episodes. In a nutshell, this show is about celebrating triumphs, pushing boundaries, and exploring rough edges. Through conversations and shared stories with friends and colleagues, it's my hope that we can begin to understand our edges. And what I mean by edges is those places where we are fearful, those places where we are resistant to change, those places where paradoxes and contradictions live in our beliefs and our understandings, both in ourselves and in the world around us. Those places where we don't want to look. We live in turbulent times. We are reassessing and reshifting, and we are coming to understand that life isn't black or white. It must be an embrace of both. And the more we recognize our own edges and get real with them, the more we can help others to do the same. And that, I fully believe, can help to change the world. So thanks for tuning in. And without further ado, it's time to introduce our guest this evening. Joseph Lee is a Jungian analyst, educator, national lecturer, and podcast co-host. Joe and I met in our freshman year at Carnegie Mellon University in the BFA Performing Arts program, wide-eyed 18-year-olds fresh out of high school, tossed into an intense cauldron of creativity, confrontation, and uncompromising work. Shortly after graduation, his interest shifted to integrative movement therapies, and he relocated to Charlottesville, Virginia, to train as an Alexander technique teacher. For the following 20 years, he focused on rehabilitative work with injured classical musicians. As his work with students progressed, his curiosity about the interface of somatic and psychological issues deepened. In service to that, he attained a master's degree in clinical social work and a diplomate in analytical psychology. Today, Joseph is a Jungian analyst in private practice in Southern Virginia, focusing on masculine psychology and men's issues. He is a co-host and co-creator of the popular podcast, This Jungian Life, and the online learning platform Dream School, where people learn how to interpret their own dreams. In addition, he is President Emeritus of the Philadelphia Association of Jungian Analysts that provides analytic training. He has lectured nationally on the Hermetic Kabbalah and Western Mystery School traditions. Welcome, Joseph.
Thank you. That was a marvelously vibrant introduction, and it puts me right back in acting
right
class
back at Carnegie Mellon, 18-year-old wide-eyed.
Absolutely. Trying to remember my lines actually was the biggest horror, of that time.
I'm nothing if not energetic, and particularly with you.
It
Oh my
warms
God, what
my
a
heart.
pleasure to have you on. Joseph and I reconnected probably like 15 years ago on Facebook, and then we've, been more in contact through our reunions. But I remember thinking, you and I seeing our posts on Facebook and seeing that we had taken these somewhat similar dot connections throughout our life. Which I want to get into. But before we do that, I want to wish you a happy Chinese New Year, because we're both into astrology. At least we were when we were 18. And we are both water tigers.
I
Did you
like
know
it.
that? We are both, which means we're calm, careful, and full of ambition. And we have strong learning ability and like new things. We embrace change. We're full of passion for achieving our goals. And just because it's Chinese New Year, I wanted to let everyone know that Jung, born in 1875, is a diligent, compassionate, and generous pig.
Shadow,
There's an intro.
shadow.
There's an intro.
That's a great
I
intro.
love Chinese New Year. When I was little, I was always so proud I was a tiger, like wild tiger. Anyway, so let's dive in. Let's dive in, my friend, and about those dot connections, how you've made the transitions and connected your dots from loving acting to moving into the becoming a teacher. And of course, I loved your choice of the Alexander technique, and then how you expanded into your desire to go back to school. Tell us briefly that story. Share with us that.
Well, I think that when I was a kid, I had already been exposed to the Hermetic Kabbalah. It was a strange and marvelous time. I was probably 16, and the school system in Long Island, where I was raised in Huntington.
Oh, that's right, Long Island.
Yeah. I'm a New Yorker.
Hey, my God. Oh, no, that's Pittsburgh.
There you go.
Just shot out of me.
And the school system, which at that time was flush with money, and now we're back, pre-1980,
Oh, yeah.
had hired a troupe of professional actors to come in and teach us. And it was such an extraordinary experience that it gave me the sense that this is what I wanted to do with my life. They also introduced us to all kinds of spirituality, which was a bit radical back down in 1978 or so. But that opened a door, and I found myself finally as a high school junior going to one of the metaphysical bookstores in Northport, Long Island, walking in and befriending this wise fellow that worked there, who began to introduce me to various esoteric topics, the most important being the Kabbalah. And there was something about the cosmology of Kabbalah that brought an ordering principle to my own psyche that I needed desperately at that time in my life. And little did I know that that archetypal draw was something that was going to be central to my career now here as I'm approaching 60 years old. So it feels like there was a mark that was set when I was a kid, right there at 16, that continued to slowly reverberate through various choices. So when it came time to choose a school, the only fun thing I could imagine was being an actor, having absolutely no sense of the reality of what that meant. And as you know, showing up at Carnegie Mellon,
No sense of what that meant.
Isn't this going to be like high school? I've got a barn, I've got a ladder. And then the first thing what happened, of course, at Carnegie Mellon is we were dispossessed of every fantasy that we could possibly have had about acting as a career and as a training process. And it was excoriating.
Indeed.
Yeah, it was a real trial by fire.
Indeed it was.
As you know. And
indeed I do.
Which created this incredible trauma bonding that happened for all of us.
For all of us.
How long we stayed at the program.
Well, exactly. And all of us are still so close. It's, And a shout out to all of them that are listening in right now.
Absolutely. After I graduated from school, I was haunted by a particular memory of Bob Parks giving us Alexander technique lessons at Carnegie Mellon University.
I love it, yeah.
And there was something about the promise of what that could do that seemed like a solution, that my own childhood trauma that had been locked in my body and it created a tremendous stiffness, both, I think, in my psychology as well as my body. Perhaps those two things happened simultaneously anyway, needed to be resolved. And so I took some lessons and decided that I really needed to commit to some sense of mastery of the Alexander technique. And when I went into training, which is 3 years, I actually thought that that was going to solve all of my kind of body trauma. And then I would take Hollywood by storm. So, so the childhood memories are slow to die. So
they are.
Right about year 2, I realized that I was a really mediocre actor, but I loved being an educator and I loved teaching. I loved the intimacy of body work and touch. And I was thrilled to be able to move into this healing modality, which I did for about 20 years. And my communication skills, which we learned as actors, was essential because I was able to present. And so many people are not familiar with being a professional communicator. After about 20 years of that, and a lot of reading of Jung and a lot of other important material, I felt the inner call. It was this little gong went off and it said, it's time to change everything. Yeah. Closed up shop, went back to school, kept going back to school until everything kind of came together. And then finally in 2018, a friend of mine that I went to school with, Lisa Marciano, said to two of us, me and my friend Deb, how about we just do a podcast? We've graduated from school. There's no other way we're going to stay in touch. Let's have fun. We don't know what we're doing. And we did have no idea.
That's the best way to start a new project.
And we all said, yes, let's do it. Let's throw it together.
Well, that a brilliant, brilliant intro to the podcast, at which we will pick up when we come back from our first break with Joseph Lee. Stay tuned, everyone.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Are you on edge? Hey, we live in challenging, edgy times, so let's lean in. I'm Sandra Bargman, the host of The Edge of Every Day, which airs each Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc. Tune in live with me and my friends and colleagues as we share stories and perspectives about pushing boundaries and exploring our rough edges. That's The Edge of Every Day on Mondays at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Chipping around, kick my brain to the ground. These are the days it never rains, but it pours on the edge of every day.
We are back with Joseph Lee. Leslie Ellis on Facebook. Just because you didn't take Hollywood by storm. Oh, I love her. Doesn't mean
I'm a mediocre actor.
It does not mean you are a mediocre actor. I highly concur. Thank you, Leslie.
Thank you for defending my self-esteem.
Yes. So, and back, thank you, Leslie. That's just beautiful. We're going to dive back in with This Jungian Life podcast, which I boom, it started in 2018. And you've done over 200 episodes. What is your listenership?
It's remarkable to all of us. But at this point, we have about 290,000 people a month. And that grows exponentially each month. So there is a certain momentum that we're experiencing. We've just passed 5 million downloads, which certainly compared to Joe Rogan is nothing. But for us as new people on the scene.
But we're not on Spotify, so there.
Keeping myself humble there. It's exciting, it's unprecedented, and it's opened some nice doors for all of us, which has just been remarkable. It feels like such a blessing.
It's so good. It is just so good. It's three dear friends, Lisa, Deb, and Joe, sitting around, all Jungian analysts, sitting around, telling personal stories, sharing insights, Jungian insights, mythologies, archetypes, and just all building on each other. And then you finish with dreamwork, which, it's just from soup to nuts. It is so delightful. And the topics are everything that they feel mythological to timely to very personal. It's really a remarkable podcast.
One of the niches that we were hoping to fill is to create a bridge between people who are not familiar with Jung's work and to create a kind of threshold for them to discover whether or not they're interested and perhaps take a step deeper. We knew that there were lots of erudite lectures on Jungian work that were easy to find, whether it's YouTube or podcasts. But we were really hoping that, people sitting around a coffee table in Peoria who'd never heard of Jung might come across the podcast and think, this is relevant. This is relevant to my life. Could provide a kind of solution for things that are troubling me. And so far, it seems like that is true. Yeah. And the feedback we get from the wider Jungian community is people are showing up for analysis, all over the United States, particularly saying that they've heard the podcast and now they're interested in going deeper. Yeah. That's amazing. That is so gratifying to all of us.
Yes, truly so fulfilling, which is, of course, one of the plethora of reasons I wanted you on this is to open that door here. And in particular, because of the topic of this podcast, the edge of every day, to really understand the edge, because the edge is based on the shadow work, and that begins with Jung as the shadow self. I mean, you can think of the edge as jumping off the cliff. You can think of the edge as pushing boundaries. You can think of the edge as the quintessential lightness and darkness, double-edged sword. But the primary reason I created it was with that shadow work, in addition to the light work and understanding, internal understanding, which is why I created the show to begin with, the first live solo performance. So speak to us about what is the shadow?
So in Jungian's concept, the shadow is everything that we don't want to be, but have a really strong reaction to. So we're all coming into the world as whole little beings. And as we're acculturated in our families of origin, in our school systems, in our friend groups, in our religious and educational institutions, we learn through these complicated feedback loops what parts of ourselves are going to be rewarded and what parts of ourselves are going to create problems. And as a survival technique, without even realizing it, we begin to parse out the things that are not okay and instinctively store them. We kind of banish them. That's a perfectly reasonable thing to do. Every child has to be socialized. And when that doesn't happen, it's a real problem, by the way. So we want to have some smooth dance with the culture that we've been born in. But sometime around middle age, when the ego is strong enough, all of those things that we've banished into the wilderness start howling. And so how I think about it is all the things that are not allowed go into a kind of internal wilderness, and they kind of devolve. And when they come back, they kind of knock on our door with twigs in their hair and mud on their face and a little bit of squirrel blood on their cheek. And they're more primal than they were when they were banished. So it's scary for us to say hello to the things that were not allowed. The other thing which is so important is many of the things that are banished are gold, are incredible talents, which for whatever reason were disallowed in our family of origin.
Yes.
So finding those things is the essential first stage of most Jungian work.
Yeah, our deep gifts that we are afraid to bring to the world because we learned as children that, and it sounds to me like in your case, some of your spiritual intuitions were a part of that. They certainly were for me.
You know, strangely enough, when my parents started finding these strange books on my shelf, I think my dad just didn't understand them. He was raised Roman Catholic and just wasn't interested. And as a matter of fact, my father was so naive that I was watching television and watching a David Copperfield special. And I said, Dad, that's magic. Magic's amazing. I need to find out more about this. So my dad, who's commuting into Manhattan, said, sure. So he comes back the next day and he tosses a paper book on my bed, and it's Llewellyn's Guide to Black Magic.
Oh.
So I read it, and I'm like scaring the pants off myself. It was so frightening that this existed, but that was kind of a strange spiritual initiation. But it speaks to just how innocent my own parents were about spirituality. That worked in my favor because they also were not oppressive about the things that I wanted to investigate. I couldn't have anticipated how important that would be later on in my life. But coming back to shadow work, there are a couple of ways that we find shadow, and one is through projection. When we're finally ready to be in a self-confrontive crucible, one of the things that an analyst will do is ask you about the people in your environment that you have a disproportionate amount of disdain for. The people you can't stand, the person at work that makes your blood boil, the political party that you just can't tolerate hearing a single word about that, or your neighbor that you just want to howl at.
Right.
And, sometimes we're legitimately angry at people, but when it seems like it's overdone, what's happening is that the part of us that we find unacceptable is beginning to rumble. And in an attempt to help us realize it, our own psychological center begins to highlight anyone that seems to have those properties, even in a tiny nodal way, and make us focus in on it. So we're kind of obsessed with this thing that they have, and we're sure that we don't. So that's the beginning of the confrontation. It comes from within us.
Oh, absolutely. So I how much time do we have, Kyle? Because this will dictate which direction I go in my next question. Because I want to share that the story that I told you about my family member. But that I want to open into the political realm. And 4 minutes. Okay. So thank you, Kyle. So in terms of then the goal of analysis, of Jungian analysis, is to mine these shadows and to see how, using the understanding of projection and using dreams.
So we might project things onto the onto our neighbors, for instance, and then find them intolerable. But often at night, we will dream of figures that frighten us, nightmares, which are, by the way, the most interesting dreams, because the thing that we're running away from, the thing that we're so horrified about, is some kind of a psychological value that we find intolerable. And if it catches us, it's going to demand recognition. So people have lots of great stories where they're dreaming of this monster that's running after them, and somebody says, you've got to remember in the dream to turn around and say, boo back to it. And then often if people can do that, or more importantly, they might be able to say, what are you here to teach me?
Yes.
That figure will almost always stop dead in its tracks. It will look at you and it will tell you a piece of information that you actually need to know, which at this point in your life is rarely as frightening as it was when you banished it 30 years earlier.
Indeed.
And that's an incredible revelation. And it's through this mechanism of dream encounters that the psychological center of your personality is able to slowly tweak the things that you're running away from and bring you towards them. Now, if we know something about shadow work, we can actually run towards it so that we don't have to be punished by our own psychology. Jung said something famously, that the things we refuse to be conscious of, we meet as fate.
Indeed.
So the more that we can accept the intolerable things in us, or as one of my friends said wonderfully, my beloved degenerates that live inside, the more we can welcome them, the more peaceful our outer relationships will be. And I have seen that work absolutely amazingly.
Oh, well, and you really just hit on the heart of all of this work, period. And of course, that's the goal, is always the willingness to see that which we are afraid of as in any aspect of our life as the thing that is the great teacher. That includes, our shadow work, what triggers us, trauma that happens to us, always being willing to, and this is not in a toxic positivity kind of way, in a genuine, I must look at every challenge, no matter how difficult, to find some sense of a silver lining and some teaching and some wisdom.
And that goes to something central in Jung's work, that everything that we find painful is a part of ourself that will make us whole, that has the promise of restoring us, which sounds counterintuitive, but it promises to be true, that our symptoms, whether they're depression or anxiety or overeating for that, have embedded in them the secret that we refuse to let ourselves know.
I love that. Well, and that is a perfect segue. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, Joseph, we are going to talk about a dream and a situation and get into some of the shadow aspects of our political life. When we come back, stay tuned on The Edge of Every Day.
Howdy, I am Joseph Franklin McElroy, host of the new podcast, Gateway to the Smokies. It airs on talkradio.nyc every Tuesday night from 6 p.m. to 7. Every episode is dedicated to memorable experiences in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park and surrounding areas. This show features experts and locals who will expound upon the richness of culture, history, and adventure that awaits you in the Smokies. Tune in every Tuesday from 6 p.m. to 7 on talkradio.nyc.
Are you passionate about the conversation around racism? Hi, I'm Reverend Dr. TLC, host of the Dismantle Racism Show, which airs every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc. Join me and my amazing guests as we discuss ways to uncover, dismantle, and eradicate racism. That's Thursdays at 11 o'clock a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a small business trying to navigate the COVID-19 related employment laws? Hello, I'm Eric Sauver, employment law business law attorney and host of the new radio show, Employment Law Today. On my show, we'll have guests to discuss the common employment law challenges business owners are facing during these trying times. Tune in on Tuesday evenings from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Chipping around, kick my brain to the ground. These are the days it never rained, but it pours on the edge of every day.
Well, I'm going to shout out to Isaiah Anson. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, beautiful soul, for your comment about your family, and blessings to all of you. So we're going to pick up with this. I want to start with this little story that feels like such a perfect little microcosm into all sorts of unpacking into our political shadow. It took place, my family and I and my husband and a few family members, my parents and a few cousins and such, and some family friends were all met in Asheville. We were all together there for a reason, and we had brunch at the Biltmore Hotel, which was fabulous. And we're walking, and my cousin and I got ahead, and we were somehow got on the conversation of reality TV. And I'm sure it's because it was somewhat new at that time, and we were he was talking about it, and I just was staying quiet and not really getting involved in the conversation. And finally, he asked me what I thought about reality TV, and I said, "Do you want me to be honest?" And yeah, please tell me what you think about it. And I said, "Well, I think that it appeals to the lowest in all of us. I find it cruel and crass and demeaning and scapegoating and all of those things combined." And I said, in addition to that, I have a sense that if it continues and grows, it will have dire consequences in our culture in the future, which was quite prophetic. And when I had finished, he told me he thought that I was condescending. And of course, at the time, I said, well, that's just simply because you think that I'm saying those things about you because you like it, when you asked me my opinion. At the time, I was unwilling to see that there was a shadow in me, a righteousness. There was a righteousness about that. But there was, it was a commentary on his shadow, a commentary on my shadow, our projections. And it was also about projections and shadows within media, and where we've and our political, I was the condescending elite in this conversation, this what was a baby political conversation. And so it feels like this fantastic little microcosm into our political scene and our social networks and all of it. Just fast forward, it's explosive and out of control. So with that, can you speak to us about the political shadow and how that has been growing and manifesting?
What was going on in my imagination as you were telling that story about reality TV and kind of Jerry Springer and all that kind of stuff. And I remember when that first hit the scene, how shocking it was, primarily because I'd never witnessed people behaving that way. I also have a bit of a suspicious side, which makes me wonder how much of that is staged and how much of it is real in terms of people really getting swept up. That's the producer in me, probably. But I was thinking about the way that the collective needs a place to ritualize what is intolerable in the civil society.
Yes.
So in the Roman era, people had the gladiators, they would go to the Colosseum, and then they would witness these horrible behaviors of murder and killing animals and killing people. And then they would go home and they would be less inclined to exercise that behavior with each other. It was a way of placating a kind of ferocious animality in the unconscious of the collective. And so those kinds of displays of savagery, whether it's just emotional savagery or some kind of a boxing, ring or any other thing, or a football field for that matter.
Yeah.
It's a way to discharge primal libido in service to keeping the culture somewhat civilized. And I think that if we sanitize the culture too much, that goes underground and a kind of sadism begins to percolate up in other environments that is garbed as help and goodness and religiosity. And we all have stories about tremendous sadistic behavior that has been delivered, maybe to us, maybe to other people, in the name of making someone better, making them a finer person. So it's dangerous to suppress too much in the collective. It's best to provide an arena where things can play out within a certain amount of boundary, and that humans, at least thus far, seem to need that. Thus, the proliferation of incredibly violent movies, incredibly sexual movies. Something in the human culture wants to engage that, and it is safer if it's engaged in the imaginal world.
Indeed.
So, stepping back to your other question about what's playing out in the political arena, I think I'm going to oversimplify that just for the point of our conversation. I'm sure there are wiser people than myself that could get into political theory. But what I'd like to lift up is the process of themification and turning people, individuals, into groups that become them and us. And every time we whitewash the particularities of a group of people, it makes it easier for us to then project our own uncivilized parts onto them, and then to punish them or seek to punish them in the way that we secretly punish ourselves when no one is looking.
Yeah.
So those savages, those brutes, those dangerous folks, and I'm not savage and I'm not a brute, and there's nothing dangerous about me, except when I'm full of rage and I'm, running after them with a pitchfork and a torch.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult to pull the generalization off and to force ourselves to see each of the people in the crowd, for instance, as complicated individuals that have a history and that have a trajectory that we don't know about. This is a central idea to Jung, which the Romans called telos. And telos means that everything in the universe is moving towards an inherent purpose.
Yes.
Now, if we don't want to think about that in terms of planets and trees, we can at least believe that most human beings that have a consciousness are actually driven in a direction. And we might be moving in that direction in a way that is extraordinarily unskillful or clumsy, or perhaps highly conscious and elegant. But there is a purpose behind even the most troubling behavior that we might witness. If we can remember that and also find it in ourselves, then we can take the tiny step of imagining that that might be possible in the people we call our enemies.
Indeed. Well, I think that you've really touched on the heart of the self-judgment that is at the heart of this kind of othering, that who decided that this aspect that I'm projecting onto them that I don't want to see in myself, of course you've mentioned that we've gotten it in our childhood, but there at some point there can come a time when we aren't so harsh and judgmental on these impulses that we have, and our willingness to take a look at those and to be more embracing of them. Because if we are embracive of them in ourselves, then of course we will with others. And then again, this connects with curiosity.
Say more about that. What are you thinking when you say curiosity?
Well, as a highly curious person, and I suspect that you are as well, I created my own little word for it, curiosative. I am deeply curious about others, other cultures, other ways of doing things. I am, as an edge walker, I am very future-oriented, very comfortable with change, very comfortable with other ways of accomplishing things. This is not to say that I don't have a big fat judgment person inside of me in my shadow, but because I think that I do. But that doesn't get in the way of me being curious about others' behavior. And a lessening of my judgment around how they choose to navigate in their journey.
I think that's beautifully said. And I think when we remember that we resort to judgment, and I claim this for myself as well, because we're all in the same soup, I go to judgment when the anxiety that's provoked by what I'm looking at becomes intolerable.
Yes.
And that takes an awful lot of energy to try to continue to be curious, even when I feel frightened. Mm. Something that a Roman playwright wrote, of course, some time ago, Terence, I am human, and I think nothing human is alien to me.
Perfect.
If we can take that on as a mantra, and really understand that as a concept, that can open the way into some scary places within ourselves. But we also have to remember that when we can feel into something and say that this is not alien to me, we're not saying that that behavior is permissible.
And what I want for myself.
Right. I may not want to do this thing that the culture says is criminal, and nor do I want to pay the cultural prices of that. But I can say that I understand how somebody gets to that moment.
Yes.
And if I were in those conditions, I absolutely could find myself acting very similarly. And I'm deeply grateful that at this point in my life, I'm not in those conditions.
Yeah. Well, and I'll close out. This makes me think of actor training, when actors say that, my character would never do that. And I was always, how do you know that your character would never do that? Given the right circumstances. We can all be capable of a lot of things that we may not think that we're capable of. But beautifully, beautifully said, beautifully shared. Thank you. We are going to take a break. And when we come back for our last quarter, we're going to talk about dream work, and I have shared a dream with Joseph that he's going to do a little dream work on. So stay tuned on The Edge of Every Day with Joseph Lee.
Join us every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern for The Mind Behind Leadership, where we focus on what leadership really means to us and to others. We have practical discussions with the CEOs of some of the world's largest companies, owners of small businesses, and experts in psychology and behavior to get that inside track, what to do, what to avoid, and what really happens. Join me, Graham Dobbin, at the new time, 4 p.m. every Tuesday for The Mind Behind Leadership, here live on talkradio.nyc.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic.
Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host the program Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc. Calling all pet lovers.
Pet Avengers, assemble!
On the Professionals and Animal Lovers show, we believe the bond between animal lovers is incredibly strong. It mirrors that bond between pets and their owners. Through this program, we come together to learn, educate, and advocate.
Join us live every Wednesday at 2 p.m. at talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Chipping around, kick my brain to the ground. These are the days it never rained, but it pours on the edge of every day.
And we are back on the edge of every day with Joseph Lee, and we are talking dream school and dream work. Now, as we mentioned in his spectacular podcast, thisjungianlife.com, for those of you that want to look it up and listen into it, at the end of each episode, they review a dream that has been submitted by a listener. And you guys also run a dream school.
We do.
Can you tell us quickly about your dream school and how we can, or do you want to jump into the dream first and then we can close up with the dream school? You can tell us all about that. Yeah, maybe that's a better thing to do. Okay. Right. So do you want me to share the dream?
Yeah, I'd love for you to read it and just put it in the space and re-evoke the feeling of it in yourself.
So this is a dream that I had the night before last. As I was preparing for thinking about what I wanted to ask Joseph, and it was a delicious dream and not one that is the type of dream that I have. I was in a very large house, and I was on the top floor, 3 or 4 stories. There was no furniture in the house, and the walls were a taupe color. And I was aware that people were running up and down the stairs. There was movement on the stairs, but I was not particularly frightened by that. I was just present to it and curious in a heightened way. There was a door, there were windows, and there was a door and on this top floor that I was on. And I heard a knock at the door, and I opened it, and there was a very large man, big, burly, had long curly hair about to shoulder length, beard and a mustache. And he was enormous, not still human-sized, but a huge human-sized man. And he was not, the door opened and there was no stairs or no anything. There was just sky behind him. And he just stood there looking at me, very present to me, but not speaking to me. And in the room with me, running around behind, not engaged with me, not asking for my attention, but certainly there was a red fox. I was not afraid of the fox. I was not afraid of the man, but I knew that the man was caring for me outside. He was protecting me. And then I woke up.
So I think that my first question, and is often true in analysis, is to ask for some personal associations, because each of us creates a kind of personal mythology. We might buy a book on symbols that would tell us something about the archetype of perhaps the house, the archetype of the huge fellow, this Paul Bunyan kind of guy at the door. But at first, it's about your personal mythology. So when you think about this 4-story house with taupe walls and very little furniture, what do you personally think about that? For instance, was it attractive? Is it a place you've ever lived?
No, I didn't know it. But I didn't, it's funny. It was not, I was not curious about it like I didn't know it. I was just there. My reaction to it is that it was efficient and clean.
So it seems like it's a space where something could happen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Definitely.
And there's a lot of frenetic energy going on.
Outside, yes.
Outside and also running up and down the stairs
down the
inside
stairs,
the building, or yeah. So the setting of the dream, much like the dramatic structure of a play, is giving us some metaphoric cues about the part of our psychological life that something is happening. So it's a house that you have some familiar feeling about, but you know it's not yours. So it's an area of your own psychology that is not unknown, but it's not something that you visit regularly. It's not something you inhabit. So in that regard, it's at the edge.
Yes.
It's at the edge of what's familiar. But it's pleasant enough, and it feels like it's a stage, so to speak, like a black box stage where things could happen. And there is a lot of energy in it already. So people are running. What's the quality of the running? For instance, they seem like they're having fun the way kids will run around, or is it more panicky, or what do you think?
It's not panicky. I wouldn't call it panicky or fun. I would just call it, again, involved.
Okay, so it's involved. And when you think about that feeling of involvement, high energy involvement, what does that remind you of?
I love that question, Joe. That's great. It feels invitational if I want to, but there is no pressure to join in.
Okay. Okay. So if you were to continue to meditate on this, you might notice that that feeling corresponds to several environments around you, several opportunities that have a lot of energy that you're looking, but you're not sure you want to step into yet. They're not scary, but you're not sure that you want to claim it and be swept into it yet. And then there's a knock at the door and you answer, which is interesting, even though it's not your home, but there's this movement towards ownership.
Yes.
Which is a little bit more personal than it was at the beginning of the dream. And we have this tremendous, powerful, long-haired man. Is he garbed in a particular way, or is he naked?
I wish he was naked. No, no. I don't have a sense. He's clothed, but I don't. It's light colored. I don't have 3 minutes. Where are the 3 minutes?
All right, well, we'll move it along.
Oh, my goodness. I have 6 minutes of here.
Right. When we think of big, are we talking like he's an 8-foot man, or are we just talking about he's 6'3"?
No, he's maybe like 7 foot.
He's 7 foot. So this is an unusual fellow. We don't, often see 7 foot people, although we sometimes do. And he's standing there in a way that it doesn't sound like he's trying to force his way into the house. It's more declarative.
Yeah.
He's saying, I exist. You have to answer the knock. So think back to your ministerial training. And who knocks at the door?
Those who need to be served.
Yes, and Christ.
Well, of course, but I think of all of the servants, all of the masters, all of them, and those, and the people who come, who want to be served.
It can be. Yeah. It can be all of those with needs.
But he is big. So to your point, yes, there was a sense, there wasn't a curiosity to be served. There was I am here to serve you energy.
And reassuring
to
you.
Your point, yes.
So the message that comes from that symbol, because he's a metaphor, he's a symbol, and the symbol is big, powerful, masculine, I am safe, and I am safe unto myself. He doesn't represent something outside of you. He represents some potency inside yourself that from time to time, if it falls out of consciousness, needs to knock on the door of your mind so that it can remind you, hey, I'm here. I haven't gone anywhere. I'm still around here.
Yes.
And inside the house of your psyche, there's you and this instinct that the fox is an instinctive.
Fox, the edge walker.
Yeah. The one who's there at twilight, investigating,
the
playing.
Cunning, smart, observant.
Absolutely.
Well, we have very little time left, and I wanted to certainly offer, thank you for that, Joe. It was marvelous and very enlightening, and I hope it was for our listeners. Your dream school. So again, you can go to www.thisjungianlife.com or depthpsychology.net to learn about Joseph, to learn about the Dream School. Is there anything you'd like to add to that before we sign off?
We'd love to see you there. Please feel free when you go to the website to send us an email, ask us any questions. And just so that people know, we're assuming that dream work is new to you, so don't be shy. Jump right in. We'll take you right from the beginning all the way through a 12-step process. And at the end, we feel confident that you will be able to absolutely unpack your own dreams. And we also have online dream groups that people are forming, which are international, and they're developing friendships, and two people started a romance. They met online. But it's just really amazing.
I would love to be
thing
a part
that's
of
happening.
This, Joe. This sounds just marvelous. Well, I've been fascinated with dreams forever and ever.
Sure.
But so again, thisjungianlife.com. depthpsychology.net. I'd like to thank you, Joe, for being on my show. I just have loved having you on. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. It's a joy.
Just wild.
To see your smiling face.
Just a wild joy. And thank you to all of you listening in. I hope you will check out Joe's podcast and his Dream School. Thank you for listening in. You can check me out at sandrabargman.com or theplumth2.com. Remember, you are always at the edge of the miraculous. Thanks again. See you next Monday at 7 p.m.
This is our last dance. This is our last dance. This is ourselves under pressure. Under pressure. Under pressure.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
Are you on edge? Hey, we live in challenging, edgy times, so let's lean in. I'm Sandra Bargeman, the host of The Edge of Every Day, which airs each Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc. Tune in live with me and my friends and colleagues as we share stories and perspectives about pushing boundaries and exploring our rough edges. That's The Edge of Every Day on Mondays at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc.
Uninformed about menopause and how it impacts on your life? Hi, I'm Pat Duckworth, women's health strategist and host of the Hot Women Rock radio show, empowering women leaders at menopause. Join me every Thursday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, 3 p.m. UK time on talkradio.nyc for interviews with inspirational women who will share their top tips to rock your world.
In a post-COVID world, you may have many unanswered questions regarding your health. Are you looking to live a healthier lifestyle? Do you have a desire to learn more about mental health and enhance your quality of life? Or do you just want to participate in self-understanding and awareness? I'm Frank R. Harrison, host of Frank About Health, and each Thursday, I will tackle these questions and work to enlighten you. Tune in every Thursday at 5 p.m. on talkradio.nyc, and I will be frank about health to advocate for all of us.
Howdy, I am Joseph Franklin McElroy, host of the new podcast, Gateway to the Smokies. It airs on talkradio.nyc every Tuesday night from 6 p.m. to 7. Every episode is dedicated to memorable experiences in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park and surrounding areas. This show features experts and locals who will expound upon the richness of culture, history, and adventure that awaits you in the Smokies. Tune in every Tuesday from 6 p.m. to 7 on talkradio.nyc.